Hey everybody, it's Chris Gilmore from Changing World Project here, and I've got a really special interview for you tonight. It's September 9th, 2017, and Hurricane Irma has just gone through the Caribbean and through Cuba, left a real wake of destruction, and it's crossing the ocean and about to hit the Florida Keys and move up the coast right now. And in my interview, I'm speaking with Emily Ruff, who is in Orlando, Florida right now, hours before the storm's supposed to hit landfall. We have a really awesome discussion about what she's done to prepare for the storm. She has a really awesome kind of community action plan, how she's been stepping up to help her community out. I've been really impressed with what a positive attitude and the amount of courage that she's showing. When some people are panicking and falling apart and starting to even fight in the streets, she's been really stepping up to serve her community and maintain a really positive and courageous attitude. So lots of gems of information that are really useful on preparing for storms and a positive attitude, and some thoughts on the bigger picture of a changing climate and what we should be thinking about on a grassroots level as communities and people to prepare. So if you like this kind of content, I just ask that you maybe subscribe to the YouTube channel here. We'll be doing a follow-up interview with Emily and lots more work like this in the years to come. You can also check out changingworldproject.com. But for now, let's get over to the interview with Emily Ruff. And Emily's from the Florida School of Holistic Healing.
Yeah.
Cheers.
So for anybody that's watching right now or about to tune in, this is Chris Gilmore here. You probably know that because you're on my page. And I've got a friend of mine that I've been that I really met for the first time this past year at the Heartwood Gathering, which is an herbalist conference that we run here in Ontario every year. And it's Emily Ruff. And Emily is in Orlando, Florida right now. She's an amazing herbalist down there that's part of the Florida Holistic, I always mix, how do you call it? Florida
School Holistic Living.
Florida School of Holistic Living. She's also part of the Herbal Action Network and as well the Orlando Grief Work. So she's had some awesome experience working with disaster recovery and using the medicine of the plants and herbs to come and help people after tragedy have come to the community. So after the Orlando shooting this past year, she's in Orlando, Florida. She's not leaving. Hurricane Irma, I'm sure some of you have been watching and learning a little bit about that. This massive hurricane that's moved through the Caribbean. I believe it's just moving through kind of Cuba right now and about to kind of cross the open ocean and hit the Florida Keys. And expected to move up her way. So we were checking in about kind of preparations and just some kind of last minute planning to make sure she had all her ducks in a row and that her community was feeling ready and hunkered down in a good way. And I've been completely blown away by her courage and positivity and, chatting about getting away from the kind of fear-based CNN media that's going around and how do we really step up as a community to this challenge here and think about this from a long-term perspective as well. So I've been really inspired by just kind of her approach to this whole gathering. And I'm sure she has some real fears and concerns inside of her, but her ability to use her tools to manage that and be there and step up in her community have been really, really inspiring. So thanks so much, Emily, for coming to say hey here. And I'd love to just chat for a few minutes about, what's going on down there in Florida. And what some of us can learn from what you're learning, in case we ever end up in a similar scenario. And the reality is we're all in this together in the long run, with climate change and just some of the craziness in the world. And I'd rather focus on solutions and what we can do about it and how we can step up and come together on a grassroots level than focus on fear and posting every scary item we see on Facebook without anywhere to actually go with it. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me, especially, hours out from this hurricane move in your direction. And maybe if you want to just introduce yourself and then share a little bit about what the last couple of days have looked like for you and some of your decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for being such a great support to us in Florida. Chris has been funneling me personal resources and tips and handbooks and just helping me feel more prepared here on the ground. And I have been living in Florida all my life. And so I've been through lots of hurricanes and tropical storms, and it's really a part of life in Florida, kind of the same as, living on the coast, you have, your storms and stuff. And so it's a process that requires preparation, but if you have adequate preparation, then, you can really fare through even really damaging storms a lot of times very safely. And then, of course, there are areas of the state where evacuation is called for, and it's really important for people in those areas to evacuate because especially on the low-lying areas on the coast, coast, as we've seen in the passages with Hurricane Andrew in the 90s, the storms can be devastating. So I think that first thinking about our hurricanes as forces of nature and really honoring them for the beauty and the power that they bring, and tapping into those lessons has been something really important for me, even just sitting outside this afternoon as the winds are shifting and we can feel the storm approaching, and just kind of meditating with that energy and trying to, kind of be in conversation or relationship with that energy in some way, if you want to say that, just to really acknowledge that it might be scary and challenging for us as humans to get through our day-to-day life. When forces like this arrive, it's still like a part of being a being of nature. And the more that we can be in relationship with these forces rather than be afraid of them, we can learn to work with them rather than against them. So those have been some of the themes coming up for me. But I was traveling much of the last month, and I was actually doing a lot of remote assistance of organizing some of the relief efforts that have been going on in the Houston area in the Gulf after Hurricane Harvey. And as I was up in New England assisting and having those conversations, I've learned of the storm that was brewing here in the Atlantic, and I returned home to Florida on Wednesday to quite surprising scene a bit. People were very, very stressed and panicked in my community at large. And so there were very long lines for gasoline, and there were stores were selling out of their bottles of water as quickly as the trucks were bringing them in. And a lot of food on the shelf was gone. I related to Chris when we first got on the phone how kind of funny it was to go into a store and expect to see the bread and the peanut butter and the bottled water have big, long, empty shelves, but then to see like the mascara and the lipstick and like the makeup aisle being empty and other places too, it really gave me a sense of my urban community's preparations being very panicked, and also not necessary. Like I sort of was like, my question was, what were they preparing for if they were buying out all the mascara? Because that's not what I'm preparing for. I'm trying to think about my life and my safety and the safety of my family. So those conversations led, Chris and I to have some conversations through the last few days around, I think, the concepts of fear and peace as it relates to disaster preparedness. And I know in my personal experience just this week, not to mention the other venues that Chris mentioned I'd worked in the last year, but really if we're carrying fear with us, it makes it difficult for us to do our work and to be able to think on our feet and to think clearly and make the right decisions as quick as we need to in these scenarios. So I really spent a good bit of time when I first arrived back home to Florida, simply just emotionally and mentally and spiritually taking care of myself and giving myself the time and the care that I needed to feel really strong and stable and peaceful moving into my preparation, so that I was preparing well and not like just reacting usually poorly if you're doing it in haste. So the concept of that, like peacefulness and preparedness. And the other piece of that is to prepare before everyone else around you is afraid because the storm's coming. So I mentioned that to Chris too. I've been traveling a lot this year, and I do have a standard go bag that I've kept for hurricanes in the past, but it's between different travels kind of been disassembled and rearranged. And so today, as I was putting those pieces back together and reorganizing my kit, even though I feel fairly calm about the storm arriving, about my own preparations, there's still fear in the atmosphere that I recognize influences my decision making. So really rewinding and thinking about how can we all prepare for these situations, not just in our physical tangible bags and having them ready before the fact, which is key, but also preparing ourselves mentally for the understanding that we're seeing disasters like Harvey and Irma so frequently, and climate change is really, I think, only going to show us more and more of these types of events. So preparing right now for Irma, I'm also keeping in the context that this is not the last disaster my state's going to see, and really like understanding this is a marathon and not a sprint for those of us that are working in these fields right now. So giving ourselves the time to do the work and know that it's a long haul ahead of us.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much for your thoughts on that. I think about that so much in my work, in the importance of mindset and all these things, and how we can often turn things that don't have to be emergencies into emergencies or make things worse if we panic, and the physical gear is obviously one part of that. And then our headspace and our connection to the land and ourselves and our purpose is obviously another part of that that's huge and fueling that. So thanks for stepping up in your community there. It's been amazing to witness that. What have things can you just kind of describe on like a physical level, what have things kind of looked like around there the last couple of days? I mean, you chatted about going into the grocery store and there being empty shelves, and including empty lipstick. Maybe we could hope that people are doing something creative with that lipstick, like using it to like around the windows so water doesn't get in or something like that. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe they're going to kiss their lover, because that's a good thing to do before.
It's a great hurricane activity.
So if that's the case, then maybe that's a good reason to be grabbing lipstick from the store. But
totally.
A few more thoughts on maybe even on where where's the hurricane at right now? What's going on with the weather? What are the kind of predictions? And then looking at let's leave it there. We'll start with that one. Just where's the hurricane at right now?
Yeah. It's grazing Cuba right now, as I understand it. The eye wall is going through Cuba, and then it's moving to the north. So it is through the evening tonight going to be kind of moving through that warm area of water south of the Keys, which anytime a storm is over the water, it's growing in strength. And then when it hits land, it starts to die back. So it is right now just like the outer edges of the storm are starting to hit the Keys and Miami and South Florida. Most of the southern coastal areas in Florida have received mandatory evacuation notices. So those folks, which is general, even if it's not the storm of the century or whatever they're calling Irma, it is pretty standard for folks in coastal areas to be evacuated during hurricanes, between the wind and the rain being more fierce as those storms are coming in off water and onto land, and also because of storm surge possibilities. Here in Orlando, I don't actually think it's drizzling at all anymore. We had a little bit of a drizzle earlier today. And by drizzle, I really mean drizzle. I had my raincoat on, but whether I really needed it or not is debatable. So we haven't had any large significant rain from the storm come yet. But this evening, those rains should be arriving. And then the eye wall of the storm is set to pass through west of my area. So I won't actually, as the models currently predict it, I won't actually have the brunt of the storm as we have been preparing for. Most likely it's just going to be a lot of rain and some wind. And it looks like the eye will be hugging the west coast a little bit more. So like Naples and Sarasota and Tampa, looks like they're going to be seeing the worst of the storm.
One thing that's I was thinking interesting about the storm, I think it was, a Category 5 the other day as it was moving through like the Dominican Republic and through some of the Bahamas and Haiti there, and has actually dropped down to a level 3 category hurricane, which I believe is related to the speed at which the wind is going and like some of the predicted swells. And there's always this debate going on. I hear every single time there's a big storm, well, is this related to climate change or not? And I hear people often say, well, any one given storm, it's hard to say, is it human impacted? Is it climate change that's causing it to be catastrophic? Because catastrophic storms have happened since the beginning of time. But one thing that comes up interesting that you mentioned to me there was just about the warm body of water in the ocean that it's crossing over. And I'd heard with the Texas storm there, that was one of the reasons that it caught up. It was able to dump so much warm and pick up speed, because I think it jumped from like a Hurricane 2 or a Category 2 to like a Category 4, like almost overnight. In a very quick short period of time. And my understanding about that is because it was already traveling over warmer than usual water, and then hit an area of water that I believe was somewhere between 2 and 4 degrees warmer than seasonal average, which allowed it to grow so quickly and dump so much rain in such a short period of time. So it's interesting to think that, the storm may not have been caused by changing climate on its own, but certainly warmer water temperatures are changing some of the weather patterns. And you were saying you've noticed with hurricanes in general over the last 12 years, you've seen some changing patterns from what you were brought up with as a child there, eh?
Yeah, we growing up, I would have in the 80s and 90s between 3 and 6 storms in a storm season. Storm season runs June through November in Florida, hurricane season. And those storms in a given season may not be full categorized hurricanes. They may be tropical storms or less severe than that, tropical depressions, but it was still, very normal. Every hurricane season, you would, just kind of June would come and you would expect that the storms would come. And so I think one thing that I've noticed in the last, 12 years, we hadn't had since the season that Katrina came in 2005, Florida hadn't had a hurricane touch land or a tropical storm in that whole swath of time. So we went from having regular storms and multiple of them year after year to not having any at all. And there's shifts in the jet stream, and there's like El Nino and La Nina that are atmospheric and, oceanic phenomena that affect our weather. But I think too, it made me think, Chris, that it's the warming temperatures on the planet are changing the waters, or changing the way the jet stream flows, or changing the way these storms form and how they come in, but also the way that humans in our communities are changing even like the microclimate of our cities by how we influence drain fields and retention ponds with development. Like I can't help but think in places like New Orleans and in Houston, where the levees have broken, like there's so much degradation to the wetlands in the surrounding areas and within the urban. And so we talked about that a little bit, but I think that the implications of humans' hand on the environment in these large and small ways is totally affecting how these storms are, the results of the storms. Oh, and it's looks like a little bit of rain just started coming, so that was appropriate time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was looking at some of the photos of Hurricane Harvey in Houston and some of the places it went through there. And, if we took climate change completely out of the picture and just said, any hurricane coming through there, they were showing pictures of Houston 30 years ago. And I saw this beautiful spread. I can't remember if it was in the New York Times or where it was, but they were basically showing the amount of green space in Houston 30 years ago. And then you could slide across the screen and basically watch those wetlands disappear over the last 30 years. And one of the pictures that really stands out to me, is this picture of a before and after picture of this creek that's flowing right through downtown. And it's absolutely massive, the creek, but it's in a giant concrete swale. And there's like lawn as far as you can see on both sides. So excess water, of course, if all we have is pavement flowing into this giant concrete canister, of course that's going to overflow incredibly quickly, right? I really see reconnecting with nature and nature as our best ally. And it's, there's a beautiful irony in there. You kind of started off chatting about part of your approach was recognizing the beauty of the weather and the natural world, and actually the beauty of even a hurricane, and what that is. It's the thing that's come in and doing damage, but at the same time, nature is also, I feel like, our biggest ally. And part of that damage is human imposed. And even if it's not human created climate change, it's the way that we're designing our cities and our ecosystems. So I feel like for me, one of the big lessons that I'm taking away from this is really thinking about the design of our properties, the design of our cities, and how do we work with nature in a more holistic way. If Houston had way more the same wetlands it had 30 years ago, I bet you a lot of it wouldn't be underwater, not to the same capacity anyways. The flooding still would have happened. I bet you the magnitude would have been significantly less, so I feel like there's huge lessons for us going forward from here about, cool, let's get serious about how we're designing our homes, our lifestyles with the reality of changing weather patterns,
Totally.
Maybe just on a personal preparedness level, it'd be neat for folks just to hear, what have you personally done to prepare yourself to be kind of hunkering down for the next little bit, not knowing what's around the next corner for you?
Totally. Cool. So I have my go bag ready to go. So if I do need to leave for any reason, if a tree falls or something, my roof is breached and I do need to leave, I have some neighbors and like a couple of different stages of like evac plan, like go down the street, go to another neighbor, like some stages. But so I have my bags ready so that if I do need to flee quickly, that I'm able to. I gathered and organized my kitchen staples so that I would have plenty of food if we have power outages, which are likely, even if the storm damage isn't very fierce, we will likely be out of power for a while. We have been filling all of our containers with water so that we have plenty of good water to drink. I feel really a little bit, I know a lot of people do have to rely on bottled water, especially if they're in a pinch for preparations, but we have so many different containers that we can fill water in. And at least in the States, what's sold as bottled water is no more safe or clean or pure than what comes out of the tap. So I've really been encouraging folks not to pay the premium price on the bottled water and just fill up some bottles. We also fill our freezers with ice, and we try to fill large plastic containers. The greater surface area and volume of the ice, the slower that it melts. We also fill plastic bags, like big gallon-sized sandwich bags with water, and lay them flat to freeze. And then you have these big blocks of ice that also take a long time to thaw, as well as freezing different types of food so that as they thaw, they'll be ready and easy for us to heat up. And I'm in an area where I feel fairly safe to not board windows. Some people will tape their windows so that if a window does break, that it's a little bit easier to clean up. We went through the garden and we pulled all the special babes that we wanted to protect and got them hunkered in the garage, and then pulled out, you kind of do a good sweep so that there's no projectiles and potential debris that can be lifted in case there is a strong wind that comes through or a tornado. And then, getting contacts together, making sure that I'm not relying on my electronic robots for all of my data in case I lose connection with them, and making sure I have paper copies of things that are in bags and sealed and in plastic bins so that all my, documents that I may need later, my home insurance and whatnot, are ready and able to access. During this particular storm preparation, because it was originally looking to be so fierce when it came through my neck of the woods, I did go through the house and take a couple of mementos and special items and pack them away also in a plastic bin in case a window or the roof gets breached. And then lots of yoga and getting some sleep, and knowing that I might have a few nights where I don't get a lot of sleep if there are, big storms and stuff. Just really trying to take it easy, but also be prepared. And, between the municipality and good friends like you and other organizations, preparedness organizations, there's really no end to the different resources that can give you a checklist of what to pack and what not to pack. And so I think those resources are so readily available that really just kind of the mental preparedness at this point, I think, is almost just as important. And then really using this as a training ground again for me to, once the storm is past, get my gear in order and make sure that I am not having to think about my go bag the day before a storm, but have it ready at a moment's notice in the future.
Yeah, you'd mentioned that when we were chatting before about one kind of additional lesson being that you usually have kind of emergency gear and stuff, but just kind of letting it slip and lax over time. And that, when you're in the eye of the storm, it's an extra kind of stress, to have to be getting that stuff back together. And how nice would it be to have that all together and be focusing on, just making sure you're in good health and mental space and connecting with family and community and stuff. So that seems like an awesome lesson there. And as I say that, I know that some of my gear is not as well together as it should be right now. So this is a good reminder. This week, what a good goal for me is going forward. So, yeah. And I think it's amazing what you were sharing about, setting up radios even amongst a bunch of your friends, passing out some walkie-talkies amongst your community that could be up within a mile radius. How nice will that be to, afterwards, if the power's down, to be able to check in with some friends and just say, hey, are you okay? We were chatting earlier. I think communication is something that people often don't think about because we're complacent. We're used to it being so easy. And in a storm, I just think about, the storms pass through and I'm completely okay. And my family are completely okay, but we have no way to communicate that to each other. And if things are dangerous outside, whether it's still because of the weather or it's power lines down or it's people that are panicking that aren't ready, if I'm going to look for if I'm walking, miles to go see my parents to check on them to see if they're okay when they actually are okay, and they're coming to me to do the same thing, and then we miss each other, now we're both creating potential for more emergency and challenges. Whereas if ahead of time we'd come up with a really solid plan, like, hey, mom, you don't go anywhere. If I can, I'm coming to you. We've got these radios to communicate, so we're going to try and call here first, and we're going to set up a contact person outside of town as well. Because, cell signals may be jammed in town or Wi-Fi signals, but you may be able to contact somebody that's out of state. So even for you to be able to be, hey, have you heard from mom? Yeah, mom's okay. She called me half an hour ago, you know, and then to say, cool, can you tell her that I'm either not coming or I am coming to stay in place? Organizing some of that ahead of time, I think, is just so valuable, because in the storm, you're not going to be able to do any of that. And I just think one of the hardest things for me, I feel pretty good about my ability to take care of myself in a lot of crazy situations, but I think the hardest stressor on me would be actually worrying about other people I'm not with. And I would imagine they're in the same place. You know, they're probably doing well and doing their best to take care of themselves, and they're worried about me. And that's going to be an extra stress that's going to be hard to overcome, you know, and keep you rational. So
Totally.
I think it's really awesome seeing some of the communications work that you've been doing ahead of time.
Yeah, well, and you definitely, you know, turning me on to the idea of calling some folks out of state, and like just having your plan with your family if they're not with you, making sure that you have that communicated well. And so once I get off the live feed here with Chris, I'm going to call my mama and just make sure she knows what my plan will be if we do lose contact. And I think that the more we can communicate with each other, then a little bit like easier these stressful times are on our mind and heart.
Yeah, I'd love to let you go, Emily. I know you've got lots going on and you've had a long day, and I'm glad you've been hanging out in the garden before the storm and rescuing all your plant friends as well. That's super inspiring. Just thought, so, you know, the storm's coming in. We have no idea how it's going to affect Orlando. We know it's pretty likely that it's going to affect the Keys in a pretty serious way. It may or may not do significant damage where you are, you know, and we'll see over the next couple of days. But just thinking about up here, you know, so we can learn from this, but I'd also like to think about, you know, how we could help on a physical level down there, you know, people from far away, and resources and stuff like that. And we were chatting a little bit earlier too, just about, you know, the kinds of organizations that we potentially support with our money and our resources. And you mentioned a couple really cool organizations, you know, that are doing work. Everyone's focused on Irma right now and forgetting that people over in Houston are still in really dire straits, as are people over in the Caribbean right now and in Haiti, and Dominican Republic, and Cuba. And the storms have already passed there, and everyone's focused on Florida when there's literally like, you know, millions of people that are not in a great place right now. And you mentioned a couple organizations that you thought were doing really amazing work on the ground that you've been in communication with.
Yeah, so I've been in communication with a lot of folks in the Texas area. They've been doing great work there in the Gulf, really trying to bring relief. And I've put feelers out for the Caribbean, so definitely for the islanders, and also for folks in Florida. I'll stay in touch with you, Chris, and you can share with your followers about work that we'll be doing here after the storm comes and goes. But in the Gulf, I shared with you, you know, there's 11 million people in the Houston area. A lot of the communities outside of Houston were the hardest hit, and are still waiting for a lot of the institutional relief to arrive to them. So there are some amazing grassroots groups that are really, you know, boots on the ground, getting food and water and basic supplies out to folks that still weeks after the hurricane hit are without those basic things. One of those groups is Gulf Coast Herbal Aid. A colleague and good friend of mine, Nicole Telks from the Wildflower Herb School in Austin, Texas, put that together. For the last few weeks, she has literally been boating around Houston at parts through the water, making connections, building relationships, establishing them, and helping get supplies where they're needed, and set up different herbal relief clinics as well as medical relief. So Gulf Coast Herbal Aid has a fundraiser going on right now, and I can send you the link after the call to share. Another group that's doing great medic relief work there in the Houston area is the Bayou Action Street Health Collective, and they are organizing medics and other professionals that are coming from around the country to help volunteer and get supplies out as well. So those are two of the folks. And then there's a group called Mutual Aid Disaster Relief that did a lot of work in Haiti after the earthquake, and they've sent some folks to do response in Houston, and also have a network that is setting up some preemptive medical relief here in the Florida area. So that's Mutual Aid Disaster Relief, and they have some great resources on their website too.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I know there's a couple organizations here from Ontario and Canada that are doing some work too. There's an organization called Overt, which is our Ontario, volunteer escape. Oh my goodness, I just forgot the acronym. That's hilarious. They're basically a volunteer search and rescue team, and they're going to be sending down water purification units. They're going to be sending down people with canine units to come and rescue people out of homes. They're sending down marine units with actual boats to be able to travel on the water. So it's cool to see some local organizations coming from Ontario that are planning to head all the way down to Florida already and raising funds for that. I know another organization called Shelter Box that a friend of mine, Kate Hemming, I don't know if you're on right now, And they're planning on sending shelters to the Caribbean for people to stay in, temporary homes that come with water and water purification. And the shelters even have built-in rainwater collection systems in them. I didn't mention that in our conversation before. They're actually really rad and innovative. So anyways, for folks that are tuning in and watching this right now, I just wanted to let you know, I'll put up some links to some of these places afterwards. So you can either contact me through my personal Facebook here if you're on there, or I started the Changing World Project, like Facebook page, Facebook group. So if you're not on there and you want to jump on there, I'm going to post links to a bunch of these pieces. And I'm going to try and get a webinar together, hopefully in the next like 10 days or so. And what I think I'm going to do is run a free webinar on preparedness and steps that we can all be taking relative to some of the situations we might be facing here in Ontario and Canada. But what I'd like to do is put it up by donations so that any funds that people want to donate for the webinar, we can find an appropriate place to send down. And I think what we'll do is just kind of watch how things play out the next couple of days, and then decide where we direct the money, whether we go down and support Emily's organization directly, or some of the people she just mentioned, or some of our Ontario organizations. One way or another, let's combine some personal preparedness planning and action on our own part with supporting some people in the recovery phase of what they're going through. So yeah, go check out the Changing World Facebook group, or you can jump on the website too, changingworldproject.com. There's not really anything on there right now. I'm just kind of working on it. But if you jumped on the newsletter there, then I'll certainly send out when we're doing the webinar and the fundraiser and stuff for that. Thanks so much for tuning in, Emily, and spending some time with us. It's been really nice to connect with you again, and particularly share some of the big picture pieces, be inspired by your courage right now. And I look forward to carrying on the conversation after things have passed over about, what are next steps with really thinking about a real good grassroots community strategy to dealing with, some of the realities of a changing world. One thing you didn't mention too, I'll just throw this in, is I bet you've got a whole bunch of really amazing herbs that are going to go a long way in the days to come from this. I think about things like wormwood. Yeah. If we end up with bacteria in the water, and even to be sniffing a little bit of lavender once in a while, when things are getting heated, and I'm sure you got some serious skills there. But yeah, thanks so much. And I don't know if you have any closing thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Thanks for all that you're sharing with your community and inspiring all of us to really think about preparedness, not just from our go pack, but from our state of mind and how important that is to moving through the world. And thanks to everyone that took a little minute to hang out with us and chat. I'm really glad that I still had some signal and could talk to you guys on the heels of the hurricane. And I'll definitely stay in touch with Chris, so be funneling some resources that way. We appreciate all the prayers and good wishes that have been sent our way. And definitely please keep also the folks in the Houston area as well as in the Caribbean islands in those prayers too, because the media is really focusing a lot on Mickey Mouse and all we got here in Florida, but there's a lot of people in the area that really need that support too. So thanks again, Chris. I appreciate it.
And I'll mention there too, the number of pieces on the West Coast that have devastating fires going through their communities. No one's even talking about the fires because of the hurricane, but I know there's a lot of people suffering from that too. So hearts, thoughts and prayers to all you folks, and along with the thoughts and prayers, let's have some action with that too. So I wish you all the best. It sounds like you've done some great stuff there, and we'll chat with you on the other side of this, and keep going in a good way. So thanks, Emily. Have a great night.
Thanks, Chris. Y'all take care. Be safe.
Cheers.